We are winning. Why not? Of course we're winning. No way. It's okay. That was a joke. No, it's serious. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's only ladies. Okay, there's two boys. We are going to learn some Torah, a lot of Torah in this time. Let's just make sure my mic's on. Yeah, things are good. We are ready to start. This Parshas boy. It's already after Rosh Chodesh. It's the second day of the Hebrew month of Shvat, and excitement in the year. It's building. We have 2 steps to take. We want to be learning about what's going on in the calendar. We want to talk about what's going on in the parsha, 11 the Zeit, and then we want to talk about one practical, relevant life message that we're going to take with us to help us be living Mashiachdik, Geuladik. So, what's going on in this week in the calendar? Anyone want to help me out? Anyone feeling brave to unmute and tell me what they know going on this week in the calendar? I'm supposed to start off with questions, aren't we? Okay, let's make it a reading. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The first big thing that's going on the calendar is this morning was Rosh Chodesh. Last night was Rosh Chodesh. It's a big deal. It's a new month of Shvat. Other big deals that are coming up this month, coming up this week, is that this Shabbos, which happens to be Parshas Boy, besides the Parsha, also happens to be the Shabbos before the very big important day of Yud Shvat, the 10th day of Shvat, which is the day the Rebbe took on the mantle of leadership all those years ago and is leading us till this very day. It's also the day of the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which means that the Shabbos before Yud Shvat becomes the Shabbos almost like Shabbos Mevorchim, Shabbos of preparation. Specifically, there were a 10-point checklist that the Rebbe suggested everybody take upon themselves before Yud Shvat, and one of them begins on Shabbos, where all men should try and get an aliyah, a call up to the Torah, because just like before, somebody who has a yard set would try and get a call up to the Torah in order to strengthen their neshama connection. Here in this world, we want to get a call up in the physical Torah so that our neshamas are more directly connected plugged into the Torah, and thereby we are more ready, more in tune, more consciously thinking about what's coming up this week, and this starts already from this Shabbos. So calendar-wise, it's semi-quietish kind of week, but the noise is really loud. The excitement of this week building up to Yud Shvat is very, very important. The Rebbe saw Yud Shvat, as he mentioned many times in the Maimah, as the beginning of a new era. The 7th generation from the Alter Rebbe, the 7th generation of Chabad, which the Rebbe spoke about many times in the Maimah, that you don't get to choose which generation to be born in. Like no one asked us if we want to be born this year or 100 years ago, but we're here. We weren't born today, born this year, but we are here. This is our generation. And the Rebbe often told us that the winning generation is the 7th generation. This is us, not by our choice, and sometimes not even by our desire. The amount of responsibility sitting on our shoulders to actually make it to the finish line, what generations before us wish they could do, is on us. We are the winning team. But the ball's in our court. The responsibility is here. The energy, the strength is here, and it takes this week to be able to rile ourselves up, to be able to fully focused, not in a way that gets intense, but in a way that gets very, very excitedly, passionately involved in doing what we need to be doing to make sure that our generation sees Mashiach ASAP on behalf of all of history. This is exciting things going on. Let's talk about what's going on in the parsha, and from there we'll go into one practical relevant message. I do want to say that last week's parsha was very easy to sum up. It was just basically 7 plagues. The week before was also pretty easy to sum up. It was the slavery in Mitzrayim, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the scene. A few extra stories. This week, we have a lot of details. So the parsha isn't that much longer, but the details cross many more different areas, so that it can take us a drop longer to get through the parsha, but each part of the story is exciting. So come, let's do it. We'll start off at the beginning of this week's parsha. Parsha's boy. Boy El Parai is Hashem telling Moshe it's time to come to Parai and bring Parai the message that we're about to have plague number 8. We had 7 plagues in last week's Seder, and plague number 8 is about to come. And one of the famous questions about Hashem telling Moshe to come to Parai. If Hashem is telling Moshe to visit Parai, should he say go to Parai? Or should he say come to Parai? Like when you say go and when you say come. You say go to somebody if they're not with us here and they're going elsewhere to Parai. When would you say come? If Hashem says come, where I am is where Parai is. So why is Hashem telling Moshe to come to Paro, boy el Paro? You shouldn't say lech, like lech lecha, lech el Paro. And of course, the answer is that Moshe Rabbeinu went together with Hashem. Hashem says, come, we'll go together to Paro. And that's because on the one hand, Paro was the superpower, the ferocious, scary individual. And although Moshe had approached him many a time, things were getting hotter and hotter. And also, more importantly, on a mystical level, on a Kabbalistic level, Paro represented a very, very deep level of godliness. It was trapped within many levels, layers of unholiness, and therefore he was doing bad things. But it was an expression of a very, very deep kedusha, very deep godly energy. And Hashem says to Moshe, don't be afraid of godliness. Boy, come with me. Together, we'll get through this and we'll do this right. And that's exactly what happens. Moshe comes to the Paro and he warns him that there's going to be a plague of locust. And the plague of locust was going to be different than all the other plagues. It was going to start being much more severe on behalf of the Egyptians. And that's exactly what happened. A wind blew all night and blew in such swarms of locusts. And the Torah describes it was impossible to see the light of day. That's how thick the clouds of locust were. And they devoured every bit of greenery that remained that hadn't been struck by the borod, by the hailstones, were devoured and eaten up by this locust plague, which obviously was a very severe plague, vegetation and food-wise. It created in itself a thing of hunger. And after that plague passed, Hashem tells Moshe it's time for the plague of Choshech dance, for the Choshech plague. And at this point, it was a week-long blackout. A blackout. They didn't help to have a generator. It didn't help to have candles. It didn't help to have anything. It was complete blackout, which got heavier as time went on. And heavier, as Rashi points out, even in Pshuto Mikra, in the simple understanding of the Parsha, it got so heavy that the individual Egyptians were frozen in their place because of the intensity of darkness. Those, Rashi says, those who were sitting remained sitting, those who were standing remained standing for 3 days. That's a long time to stay in one place. That's how intense the darkness plague was. It wasn't just switch off the lights. It wasn't just make sure no sunlight or moonlight or starlight came in through the windows. It was a thick heaviness of darkness that struck, and that was just plague number 9. Hadn't yet broken the camel's back, and Paro is still defiant after the plague of darkness. Just in parentheses, we are doing in today's chitas that during this plague of darkness, Hashem intentionally made this happen so that those Jewish people who were not going to make it out of Egypt and were going to pass away should not pass away in broad daylight, open to the Egyptian eyes, so that it shouldn't feel like the Jews are also being plagued. There was a great emphasis on singling out the Hebrews, the Jewish people at the time, so that they should themselves and in front of the Egyptians also be obviously greater. Although for years they had been the underdog, the slave, the nation that wasn't even worth looking at, they were now being selected by Hashem. Hashem wanted them to feel special. When each one of the plagues plagued the Egyptians, the Jewish neighborhoods were spared for each one of the plagues. And in this particular case, when it was the plague of Choshech, Hashem used the cover of darkness, so to speak, to make all those Jewish people who were going to pass away then. And another interesting thing Rashi talks about the plague of darkness is that the Jewish people had a chance to do some reconnaissance, go around and notice and find where the hidden treasures of the Egyptians were. I think this is worth mentioning that perhaps this was also an opportunity to demonstrate the Jewish integrity. They were not told that it's okay for them to take whatever they wanted from the Egyptian homes. And although no one could stop them, they didn't take it then. Instead, they did the reconnaissance. And as Rashi says, later, not much later, when it was time to leave Mitzrayim, which we'll talk about in a minute, they knew what they could ask each Egyptian neighbor for. Can we have such and such? And if the Egyptians said, oh, we don't have that, they would say, well, actually, it's in your drawer, the third one down from the right-hand side. And it's there safely. Please, can we have it? And the Egyptians say, you know what? You have that and have the one next to it as well. Just go. But how did they know what to ask for? This is what they did during the plague of darkness. Even though they didn't take it, they noticed what was where. And then this brings us to the 10th plague. And actually, Paro has already been warned that he's going to have this plague from right at the beginning. Already in last week's Sedra, Moshe tells Paro that Hashem's going to kill the firstborn of all the Egyptians. Just to put that in context, the firstborn was the heir to every family. So it's hard for us to imagine that in nowadays, but if children are owned by their parents and are there to serve the family name, the oldest child, especially if it's a boy, becomes the future of the family. And the heir of the whole family is the pride of the entire family. So taking out the firstborns of the Egyptians was a very, very big deal for the Egyptians. And they'd been warned from the beginning that Hashem is going to kill the firstborns. But now Moshe says, this is coming, this is your next plague. And in between the time that Moshe warns Paro that they're going to have that plague and the plague actually hitting, but the Jewish people are commanded a whole bunch of stuff that happens in that window. So what we've just been cruising through, one plague after the next, this is number 10, all of a sudden we're zooming in because in that 1 week, in that space of time, a lot of things took place. One thing that took place already earlier in this is that we had the very first mitzvah. It's recorded now, but it took place a few days earlier on the first day of the month of Nisan. The plague is going to hit on the 15th day. But on the first day of Nisan, Moshe Rabbeinu is taken outdoors with Hashem, and Hashem shows him the new moon, the rebirth of the moon, and says, Moshe, once a month, the moon goes to its fullest. That's the middle of the month. At the end of the month, the moon is not visible to people on planet Earth. However, when the moon is once again resighted, just of the way it orbits and reflects the sunlight, that's the new beginning of what we human beings can see of the moon. At that point, we're going to call that a new cycle. And Hashem literally created a new measure of time that had gone unnoticed. It was irrelevant to most things in life. And Hashem says, not only is this going to be relevant, we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it renewal. It's going to be called Chodesh. Chodesh means new. We're going to call the new moon renewal. Not only are we going to call it a name, we're going to build a calendar around months. Lunar cycle is going to have monthly small cycles. Now, to put that in comparison, in contrast to the solar year that we talk about, January, February, March, or seasons, summer, winter, autumn, spring, all of that revolves around the sun, and you can actually tell which time of the year we're up to just by walking outside and looking what's going on most days and seeing the weather. Okay, if it's a cloudy sky, you might be in Manchester. But in some other places, in most places, you can tell which season you're in based on what's going on. And Hashem says that's true up until this point. New method of counting. It doesn't follow the sun, it follows the moon, and it goes month by month. There is nothing monthly about the solar year. There's no reason for us to divide a solar year into 12. 4 seasons sounds good. You want to make it 6 seasons? No problem, 6 seasons. What's up with 12 months? And the answer is 12 months has nothing to do with the sun. It has everything to do with how many moon cycles you'll get in a year. But this idea of counting by the moon, this week's Parsha. Hashem says to Moshe, we're about to start new. Yiddish people are going to run on a loony calendar. Yes, we'll tweak it according to the sun, and we'll make sure that it always stays. Pesach will always be in the spring. We'll have the adjustments. We'll have leap years, but it's going to be lunar cycles that we're counting. Becomes the first mitzvah in the Torah. And from there, we have a next mitzvah followed up. Also in this time span, written here in the Parsha, is the story of the first Karban Pesach. It was actually the first communal offering that the nation was going to bring as a community. And it was going to be everybody's bringing the same offering at the same time. And it's going to be groups of people. And we're going to eat that offering that we bring to Hashem. Part will go to Hashem. Part will be eaten by everybody, all people involved. What was that? It was the first Seder night where everybody got involved to stay indoors. But they had to prepare that Seder night with Pesach preparations. People say the word Pesach and they get nervous. Oh, we have to start preparing. That's how Pesach always has been. We were in Mitzrayim. We hadn't do peace, but there was no Pesach cleaning, but there was still Pesach preparations. Selecting that lamb, tying it to your bed 4 days in advance from the 10th day of Nisan, and then on the 14th day of Nisan, the day before they were going to have the 10th plague, Yiddish people were commanded to get ready to have a meal, which would become the Seder, slaughtering the lamb, and as we remember, dipping the blood and painting the doorposts, staying indoors, and having that meal together with matzah. They had to have matzah. They hadn't had Fidji yet. They never left yet with the dough on the back that didn't rise because they hadn't left yet. They were still in Mitzrayim, but they had to have matzah. They had to have the Pesach lamb, and they had to eat it, masnech and chagurim, all dressed, ready to leave at the drop of a hat. And that's how they had to have their Seder night. And this is what they learn. It's going to happen. It was then at that Seder night, during that 14th becoming the 15th day of Nisan, when it was at midnight, that's exactly when Hashem struck every firstborn in the whole of Mitzrayim, and people started realizing this is crazy. This is really happening. And the Paroi, who himself was a firstborn, came running to find Moshe through the streets of the Jewish neighborhood, trying to say to the Yiddish people, leave now. And Moshe says, we're going to leave when Hashem says so. We're not leaving here in the middle of the night as if we're runaway robbers who out. No, we're going to wait until the morning. And when Hashem says it's time to go, no one's going to stop us. Everyone's going to help us. But the Egyptians are egging them on, rushing them to leave. And until midday, it's going to be 12 hours from midnight until 12 day midday, where the Yiddish people don't leave the homes at night. And during the day, they have a very special obligation, which is to go around and collect wealth with which to leave Mitzrayim. And Moshe Rabbeinu encourages them to do this mitzvah that they had, to follow Hashem's instructions and take the wealth of Mitzrayim with them, as Hashem had promised their forefather, our forefather, Avraham Avinu. Now, the end of the parsha, the Yiddish people are leaving Mitzrayim, we get told about a whole bunch of additional mitzvahs that are commanded to the Jewish people whilst they have not yet received the Torah, they haven't yet got to Sinai, they haven't even left Mitzrayim, they have already been told a whole bunch of mitzvahs. One of the mitzvahs will be the mitzvah of observing Pesach by not eating any chametz. No leavened bread will be eaten to observe the anniversary each year of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of Mitzrayim. They also get the mitzvah of telling the story each year. So not eating chametz, retelling the story of this exodus, of this redemption to the children, keeping it alive. We also have the mitzvah of redeeming our firstborn sons, all the firstborn sons, in response to the plague of the death of the firstborns, in which all the Jewish firstborns were spared for all future generations until this very day. We redeem firstborn sons, a mitzvah in this week's Sedra, and we also have an ongoing reminder to remind us of the leaving of Mitzrayim. Every day, Jewish men over the age of a mitzvah must wear tefillin on the arms and the head as a reminder that we were the ones who left Mitzrayim and released from bondage. Inside the tefillin, there is a scroll that tells that story by talking about the Yetzias Mitzrayim, quoting this week's parsha, as well as another 3 parshas in Yishmael Tefillin. All of that, and all of those different details, which can also be much more elaborated, are all included in Parshas Boy. Fun fact, the laning, the reading of this week's parsha, Parshas Boy, is one of those sedras that many yeshiva bachrim and married people know very well. Why do so many people know the laning of Parshas Boy so well? And the answer is because, as we mentioned earlier, it's the Shabbos before the 10th of Shvat. It's the Shabbos before Yud Shvat, which begins the preparation for Yud Shvat, in which everybody's trying to get a call up to the Torah, and therefore you'll find many extra minyanim reading this week's parsha, which means you need a few extra balakora each year in each shul and each shtibel, and a lot of people end up knowing this week's parsha, and that's Parshas Boy for us with a fun fact. Okay, we are almost ready to do our question. I just want to go here for a second. Sec. Here we go. Question for today. Have we got that? Is timing important? Question mark. Second question, is there a mitzvah we do with time itself? Help me out. One question at one time. Is timing important? Anybody feeling brave, ready to unmute?
Or what?
For anything?
Oh, anything at all.
Yeah. How
So
important is timing?
it's important if you need to go to school on time, get up, have a meal, shop, cook. It's important for lots of things in life.
Yeah, let's choose the question the other way around. Is timing ever unimportant?
Well, if you're running to do a mitzvah, it's very important. If you're not running to do one, it's not as important.
Wow, that sounds like a Rebbitzin. I like it.
I wish.
Okay, is there a mitzvah we do with time itself? Anyone else feeling brave?
Running to shul on Shabbos,
Okay, so
getting
coming to
to
shul
shul.
on time, the shul is one mitzvah, and the timing maybe is another mitzvah. Okay, let's get some more timings. Use the word Shabbos. I'm going to borrow the word Shabbos there. What's a timing mitzvah of Shabbos?
Making sure the candles are
Oh,
lit.
so
Exactly.
lighting the candles is very important.
And
But make
before
sure the
that,
candles
giving
are lit at the right time, not too early. If you light your candles on Tuesday,
no,
it don't
and
count.
no,
And if you
that's
light your candles
ridiculous.
1 minute too late, it's better
It's
not to light them.
absolutely. And also making
Okay?
sure tzedakah is given before you even think of lighting the candles.
Whoa, 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 we're on it today. And I'm just asking, is there anything that not only the mitzvah should be done at a particular time, but the time itself is the mitzvah? Complicated question. It's like a little deep there.
No,
It's a
but there
little
is
specific. But I'm
there
going
is
to
an
ask you to
answer.
think about any mitzvahs. You know what? Hint, hint. Are there any mitzvahs that have to do with counting? The
Yes,
mitzvah to count.
the Omer counting the
Oh, very good. Counting the Yomer is one example where the actual mitzvah is to count time. What's another mitzvah of counting that is a mitzvah?
getting deep now. Hold on, to think.
One of the examples, one of the examples of counting is Shemitah, which is like the Omer, but
Yeah,
counting 7 years. It's not a mitzvah for every people, but it's a mitzvah for the Beis Din to count 7 years of Shemitah and Yovel and to announce the day of the year of Yovel. Equally, you have the mitzvah. It's not necessarily, I think this is probably a machlokes whether it's a mitzvah or not, but it's certainly something that's commendable, which is for a woman to count the 7 days, the 7 white days, to count one
yeah,
day which day they're up to. That's the same idea where the time becomes significant. I'm going to say holy, becomes
yeah.
a mitzvah, the time of counting. We're going to talk about, actually, in this week's parsha, we have a mitzvah that has to do with the time itself, also a counting mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah of the calendar. Now, it's not so obvious that the calendar is a mitzvah because the calendar tells you when to do which mitzvahs. Like you got to do Pesach on the right day, check your calendar when that is. But is the calendar itself a mitzvah? I mean, that's the time that we're doing things. But is it a mitzvah to figure out the calendar? What do you think?
Hasn't the calendar figured it out for us?
Yeah,
We could
AI.
try. I
Just
mean,
put it into Google.
yeah, it's. Oh no, you can't go to Google if you're me. I mean, you have to look and see where things are, but haven't those things already been done in Torah so that we know when we're actually doing things?
That's correct, correct. But in a way, it's a bit like saying you don't have to grow cucumbers because they're already in the store.
Well, I
That's not
suppose.
correct. Obviously, cucumbers don't grow in the store. They're in the store because they grew. And the reason why we know what the calendar says and it's already printed or it's already been worked out is because somebody worked it out in the Torah beforehand. And actually, we're going to learn that there is a mitzvah to put together the calendar. Who has the obligation to put together the calendar? Not every shmerel, not every yossel has to make a calendar, but the Beis Din have a mitzvah to make the calendar. And it's not optional, it's mandatory. And by doing so, they're actually fulfilling a mitzvah. Not only are they fulfilling a mitzvah, it is the very first mitzvah in the count of the mitzvahs that we have that we're going to learn about. Not in every count, because obviously the first of the Ten Commandments of the Sefer Dibros is the first mitzvah recorded in the Torah ever is already back in Parshas Bereshis, where Adam and Chava are told to go forth and multiply. So a mitzvah of having children already way back when. But the first mitzvah we get as Yiddish people is going to be a Chodesh Lechem, Rosh Chodashim, to sanctify the Yiddish calendar that doesn't run on the sun, it runs on the moon, a lunar calendar, which actually doesn't really make a lot of sense because it doesn't even add up to a full 365 year. It needs to be adjusted. So if that's our calendar, how are we going to make it adjust? But that is the mitzvah. So let's see it inside. Let's do a little discussion, and then we're going to learn about why would Hashem give us mitzvahs in the first place? Why would he give us a mitzvah about time and make that the very first mitzvah he gives us? The first mitzvah ever we have to learn as Jewish people is about sanctifying time. What does he want from us? What's the messaging for us? And more importantly, I'm going to use the word relevance to us in our life, that our first mitzvah as a Yiddish people became Chodesh Lechem. Here we go. Let's do some sukkim. The pasuk of this week's parasha says, "Vayem Hashem Moshe v'Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim." Then Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "Chodesh Lechem Rosh Chodashim." This point of the moon's renewal, Hashem was obviously pointing at something, marks for you the beginning of the months. This month will be for you the first month of the year. Note, this verse, pasuk base, verse 2, has two aspects to it. Look at the moon just being renewed. That is called the beginning of a month. And the month we're in right now will be the beginning of a year. So this calendar has months and it has years. And the months will start when the moon renews, and the years will start on this cycle. Okay, interesting. So how do we know that it's 12 months in a year? Maybe it's 24 months in a year. Good question. But this becomes the mitzvah right now to be able to make the new moon called the new month, and the month that they were in at that point, which was Nisan, should become the beginning of the months of the year, the month of Nisan. Okay, we're not finished yet. Rashi. Let's have a look at Rashi. Hashem showed them the moon at its point of renewal, and he said to Moshe, when the moon renews, it will mark the beginning of the month for you. Okay, better explained. However, the Torah passages cannot depart from the straightforward meaning. Hashem was referring to the month of Nisan and saying, this will be the first in the order of months. The following month, Iyar, will be the second month, and Sivan will be the third month. Says Rashi, there's two ways to understand this pasuk. On the one hand, he was just saying that the year begins with the beginning of the moon. He wasn't saying that there are 12 months in a year. He wasn't saying anything to do with how long a year should be. He was just saying that this is the beginning of the month. However, the verse does say a year. And therefore, we're going to say, just check, the Chot Shashani, yeah? He's going to say that the bottom line is it must also be talking about a lunar year, not just lunar months and lunar cycles, and that's what we're going to have to take with, says Rashi, the basic pshat as well as the more explained pshat. Okay, the first mitzvah of the Torah, if you were writing the Torah, what would you say would be the first mitzvah? I might suggest that the first of the Ten Commandments, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am your Lord, your God, know that I am Hashem, is probably the first mitzvah. It's the starting point. If we don't accept Hashem, we can't even start accepting any of his mitzvahs. If we don't understand what Hashem is, how can we understand any of his commandments? And therefore, as a baseline, it would make sense, it's logical, it's understandable to put the first of the Aseret HaDibros as Anochi. And probably it would also make sense to put that as the first mitzvah in the book. However, calculating and establishing the Jewish calendar is actually the first mitzvah, as we mentioned, and we're going to talk about that. This isn't news to us. The fact that the first mitzvah of the Torah is a Chodesh Lechem has been told to us, we've made a big deal out of it many times in this platform, the fact that the first mitzvah of the Torah is a Chodesh Lechem, in the very first Rashi, way back when, in Bereshis, we mentioned this fun fact that the first mitzvah in the Torah is a Chodesh Lechem. At that point, we weren't bothered about what exactly the details of the mitzvah was. We were just saying what the mitzvah finds itself a book and a half in, rather than the first mitzvah being written to us at the beginning of the book. And that's what we were concerned about there. Why? There's a whole book of Bereshis, plus the Parashah of Shemos and Be'era, and half of Boy, before you actually get to the first mitzvah. And there Rashi explained, and this is what Rashi explained there, why is it so delayed? Rabbi Yitzchak says, the Torah should have begun with a passage this point of the moon's renewal marks for you, since the first mitzvah the Jews were instructed. Instead, it tells us the whole history of the making, of the creating of the universe, and the brief history of the very first humans until we get to the Yiddish people, because koyach maisav higid liyamai. The Torah begins with creation to establish God's authority. Only then is the first mitzvah introduced, a book and a bit later. So we learned this 15 weeks ago, 14 weeks ago, I don't remember how long. But those weeks ago, when we got to Parshas Bereshis, this is already taught to us. Today we're asking, let's look at that one more time. We know why we have the introduction of God's authority. We learned that back then. Now let's talk about, when we finally get to the first mitzvah, how did calendars become the choice for the first mitzvah? Our question is, what makes this mitzvah so special that it deserves to be the first? Question mark. So now in order to answer this question, we're going to do a little layered answers. One answer, dig deeper for a deeper answer, and then deeper still to be able to walk away with a practical, relevant life message. Before we do that, any other questions, comments, or suggestions, or maybe an idea of what the answer might be? What makes the mitzvah of a calendar so special that it deserves to be the first?
Because we have to follow it each and every day. And that's what makes it so special.
Very good.
Everything we need is in the calendar. The dates, the Yom Tovim, the times of Shabbos, the times it finishes. It's the lead into every single thing we do as Jewish people each and every day.
Well said. Well said. So much of our Yiddishkeit, I don't know if everything, but so much of our Yiddishkeit revolves around that calendar. It's a very big deal to make the calendar. I mean, if a person doesn't fast on Yom Kippur, that's a very grave sin. But if you don't know when Yom Kippur is, you don't stand a chance. So the calendar is the basis of the whole Yom Kippur. And the same with not eating chametz on Pesach, and yes, eating matzah, and keeping Shabbos. And there is so much space around the calendar. But we're going to dig a little deeper in the fact that it's very relevant, because there are many things that are relevant, some more than others. But this we're going to look for is actually in the name Chodesh. Chodesh comes from the word chidush or chadash, which means renewal, new. And we're going to suggest that all of mitzvahs, and if we use the word commandments for the translation of mitzvah, then we as people are on a mission to follow those commands. And the purpose of the commands and those mitzvahs that we have, the job description of us human beings, is to make this world reformed, changed, shaped, I would say reshaped, to have a new aspect to everything in the world around it. And bringing this newness into the world is the purpose of our role of all the mitzvahs. And therefore, the mitzvah that is called renewal, in a way, sums up the objective of all the mitzvahs that will follow. So the mitzvah of a chodesh, the mitzvah of the month, which is the same word as chidush, renewal, gives us a taste of what all the mitzvahs should be, and that's why it becomes the basis on a very basic level. A central theme to the Jewish mission is renewal, and here the Sikha says, the passage, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, the renewal marks for you, encapsulates the aim and purpose for the entire Torah and its commandments. This is why it is the first commandment. The Torah and its commandments were designed for Jews to bring newness into creation. Chodesh, the Hebrew word for the month, means chidush, newness. The power of renewing creation was given to you. So HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem literally means we were given a new month, but actually it can also be understood to mean we were given the power to make things new, to renew creation. People who transform the world into a home for Hashem through studying Torah and observing His commandments make the world a better place, a new place. Hashem designs a perfect world, and our job is to insert more perfection into Hashem's perfect world. How so? By doing these mitzvahs of renewal, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. And here you have the word Chodesh and Chidush, which have shared the same root, month, a newness. And this is what the Torah is telling us, the purpose of all of the mitzvahs are to renew creation with its holiness. Okay, that's a very basic idea. I would say basic not because it's not complicated, but basic because it's just an idea that helps us appreciate that the name of this mitzvah and a little bit of the concept connects to what all the mitzvahs will follow along. But actually, what we're going to do now is say, bring in Chassidus, bring in Kabbalah. Let's delve deeper. Let's open up the bonnet. Let's look into the recipe and see why actually does it express itself in this name. What are the workings of making a calendar? What are the workings of a mitzvah of months that make it so basic, so foundational to all other mitzvahs? And the answer is going to be a better understanding of what happens when we do any mitzvah. How does a mitzvah make anything become holy? So let's just say I've taken a glass of wine and I've used it for Kiddush, and now the wine has become a kois shel bracha, a cup of blessing. I've changed the wine. What's changed about the wine? The chemical consistency of that wine seems to be exactly the same, but actually, no, it's now become holy. And the same is true with every other mitzvah that we might use. We take an object and we search it with holiness. And we're going to say that using time to declare a new month makes the time itself become a holy time. Because now that time has been used for a mitzvah, what we just had yesterday, or this morning, which was Rosh Chodesh, was a holy time, a sanctified time. And that's what the Beis Din would say in their Beis Din. When they announce a new month, they would say, Mekudesh HaChodesh. Mekudesh, Mekudesh. And we do Kiddush HaChodesh. That's exactly what we're saying. We're announcing that bit of time to become, instead of just a moment, a piece of time, it's actually become a holy piece of time. Let's see it inside. It says the Medrash, Shmois Rabbah, Hashem sanctified the Jewish people as it's written, be holy unto me, for I, Hashem, am holy. As a result of being holy unto Hashem, whatever we sanctify works. The item or the thing becomes sacred because we were given that power by Hashem. Just as Hashem is holy, He gave us the ability to make things holy, and that's what we do every time we sanctify a thing. Would you like an example? To see an example, ask the Medrash. Consider the tabernacle's vessels, the Mishkan and its vessels. Moshe sanctified the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Who sanctified its vessels? Asked the Medrash. And says the Medrash, Moshe could have come along and sanctified those two. Instead, it was left to the Kohanim. The Kohanim used it to receive a sacred object. And as they used each vessel to do the service of Hashem, that vessel became holy in response to what they chose to do. If a mundane vessel becomes holy when it's filled with something sacred, how much more so does time become holy when the holy Yid sanctifies a new month? Says the Medrash, this is the secret of sanctifying time. The time itself becomes a holy moment. Let's just take a moment to think about that. Take a moment. Make this moment holy. What does it mean to have a moment, a time that has holiness? We are much more familiar with items that are holy. You walk into the shul, the holiest place in the shul is behind the curtain, in the ark, in the Kodesh, in the Arna Kodesh. Inside there is the Sefer Torah, handwritten, every word exactly according to the halacha. Now the Sefer Torah is the holiest item we have today. It's an item that you can touch, you can say, you can put it in a safe place, you can show reverence to it, you can stand up when the ark is open, and you can understand, or at least we can develop an understanding for its sanctity, for its holiness, because it's a thing. But what's time? Where is time? Like, where are we going to show reverence for a moment? Who are you looking at? A piece of paper of your calendar? Maybe it's your iPhone or something else. What's the reverence we're going to show for time? And the answer is there is. We do that. We don't behave in certain times the same way we might behave at different times. For example, keeping Shabbos holy, or not eating on Yom Kippur, or not having chametz when it's Pesach. Times can also be sanctified just like things can. And what we're going to learn now is that actually sanctifying items, making things holy, is second to something that's much deeper, more foundational, and that is making time, moments into holiness. This mitzvah isn't first only for its theme of renewal, it fulfills the Torah's mission most deeply by sanctifying time itself. So now I want to take a few moments at time, but let's take a few moments to try and establish that actually time is one of the most foundational things we have as creations. What does time even mean? Who decided that time exists? Maybe there's no time. Maybe it's just a made-up thing. And the answer is that in the most truest form, time is just a way to measure change. Past, present, and future is only different because there's a difference between past, present, and future. If there was no difference between past, present, and future, there would be no time. So time isn't a thing, but time is a way to measure change. And change happens before things come into being. Let's do that inside. Time and space are the foundations of all existence. Okay, now this is something that Kabbalah makes a massive deal out of. Let's just safely assume, without bending our minds right now, that everything that we can imagine, anything that we can define, or better said, anything that has definition, has to exist in time and space. Now, it can exist across all the spectrum of time, and it can exist across all the spectrum of space, but we can only imagine things existing within time and space. We can't imagine any things that are not they don't have a limit of time and a limit of space. Like if you try and imagine what happens at the end of space, or you try and imagine what happened before time started, you're going to run into a few mind-bending heart headaches that don't really help us figure that out because there is no way we can really understand what happened before time existed, because before itself is part of time. However, this quote here we have from Sha'arich Vemuna, the term world, Olam, applies exclusively within space and time. Anything that we know as part of creation refers to within the ideas, the definitions of space and time. Space denotes east, west, north, south, up and down, so any direction. Time represents the past, present, and future, things that change, they don't stay the same. Now, all of creation assumes that there's a change, because if Hashem creates something, that means that before it was created, it was not there. And now that's changed to yes, be there. And that change is time. Not necessarily because anyone's counting, and there were certainly no clocks measuring that time, but the change happened. And that's a concept of past, present, and future. And that's why we talk about Hashem, that Hashem exists without time, above time, and Hashem transcends time and space because Hashem created time and created space. But which of those two did he create first, space or time? Well, the question gives itself away because first already implies that there was time, right? So which does Hashem create first? Is the first thing is that there's a concept of change, and now Hashem is going to say that within this new concept, there will be a definition of forward and backwards, up and down, east, west, north, south, and the rest. So space is secondary to time. Now, I'm not going to test you on this, and I'm not going to hold you accountable to this, but it's important for us to realize that at the very core foundation of everything we know, before we get into elements, before we even get to atoms, and before we get to quantum physics or anything, the very beginning of creation is the ability for things to be. And that for things to be, it requires the concept of space, and space requires the concept of change, i.e., aka otherwise known as time. Time and space are foundational before we even have any material or any things. And space is after time. And what we're suggesting here is at the very core of foundation of all of creation is Hashem's creation called time. Hashem's creation called time is so foundational. It's at the very base of everything we do. And when we say Hashem wants us to renew the world, He wants us to take all of the things that are in our circle and use them to make them holy, but not just the things. He wants us to look at right down till the beginning of time and sanctify moments. That's why Bereshis says, the Sepharno, this refers to the beginning of time. This was the first indivisible moment of existence. There was no time before this. Bereshis means the beginning of what? Beginning of time. So now, to answer our question, the mitzvah of the calendar sanctifies the foundation of all existence. The mitzvah of the calendar is the very first mitzvah because it is the mitzvah that transforms, that renews, that brings holiness not just to any particular thing, but it sanctifies and brings holiness to all of time. And time is so important. Now, you might be looking at yourself and thinking, where do I fit into all this? What's the relevance of what the Beis Din are going to do is sanctifying all time? I have an appreciation for the good things the Beis Din do. Question number one, how does this mitzvah even bring holiness to the mundane days of all the month? Number one. Number two, how do we bring holiness to time in our day and age when we do not practice this mitzvah of making a calendar? And we are certainly not going to be the ones announcing what the calendar is. Where is the relevance of this week's Sedra's messaging to us? We're just regular people, just trying to do the next right thing and bring Mashiach in our time. And the answer is going to be so loud. It's so important for us to know this. And the Rebbe wants us to notice that this is exactly what the Torah is telling us, by telling us the first mitzvah, all about the calendar. We see it inside. So starting off from a quote from the Rambam, when there's no Jewish court, we establish a monthly calendar and issue leap years solely according to the fixed calendar that's following today, and testimony of new moon sightings of no consequence. How does sanctifying the moon, sanctifying time work for us today? So here's the beginning. Everything in this world was created to serve Hashem. How do I know? Maybe not. Maybe some things were created in this world just because. So there's a very basic answer, and that is if you've ever had a painting that looks great, that was made by a human painter, not by AI. The truth is AI probably also fit in this. But if somebody painted a gorgeous painting, you can be sure that every stroke on that painting was done there for a reason. And if the painter was Hashem, then owes nobody anything. Oh, they say in America, they owe nobody nothing. Hashem owes no one anything. You don't have to do anything for anyone. The only reason he created 15 ants instead of 14 ants is because every ant is part of a cosmic, divine plan. Now, the fact that we don't know what the plan is doesn't change the fact that Hashem has a very good reason for every single bit of his creation. And it's also safe to assume that Hashem created is because that's what's going to make his world the world he needs for his vision. Everything in this world was created to serve Hashem. And everything includes me. And all the things that are part of my life. And all the opportunities that present themselves to me in my life. And this is where we want to go. Mishnah Avos tells us everything Hashem created in his world, he created for his glory. What is the glory of Hashem? The glory of Hashem is when a human being, a mere creation, a speck of a speck, somewhere in the vast globe of planet Earth, which is a speck in the Milky Way, in the vastness of the galaxies that Hashem created, that's Hashem's glory. When this little creation gets in line and leads into Hashem's master plan, that is his glory. And the glory of Hashem creates everything so that every single part can be part of that glory, being Hashem's partner, becoming Hashem's partner. That's what Hashem created everything for. And here's another quote, a quote from the Mishnah in Kiddushin, I was not created for anything other than to serve my master, Hashem. The greatest achievement that we have and the purpose of it all. So now, this is what every part of creation is created for. we would say this, you say, well, who says? But the Zohar says the following. Says the Zohar, when Hashem created the universe, he looked into the Torah and used it as a blueprint to create the world. Through the Torah, the world was created. The Torah itself establishes this because it says, the Torah says, I was a nursling beside Hashem. El tikra aman ela aman. Do not read the word as nursling. Aman, read it as architect. Aman, the Zohar reads into the very pasuk of Proverbs and Mishli that the Torah, all of Tanakh, becomes the blueprint for creation, which means all of creation, if we follow the Torah, will lead us to the ultimate design of what the world was for. And we're not just talking about things, time too, which, as we established, is the very core foundation of all of creation, was created to serve Hashem, even the mundane times. Now, I'm going to ask you to just think for a minute, minutes to minute of time. There is not a moment of existence that happens by mistake. There is not a moment of existence that's arbitrary or just because. That was created on purpose. We're now extending that to every moment of time. It's for a purpose and it's on purpose. And this is not just things, this is time. Time is holy. Time is waiting for us to use it. And at every moment, the opportunity is there. Here's a quote from Tehillim, Asi Reach L'Me'adim. The pasuk David HaMelech says is, he made a moon for festivals. Why did Hashem create the moon? So we should know when Yom Tov is. Says Rashi right there, L'Me'adim for the festivals. This refers to calculating the times of the festivals. The very reason why Hashem created the moon that orbits the earth, or that we can see at night, and it can grow large and small, is in order to create a calendar. We think of it the other way around. Oh, it's such an arbitrary thing. Oh, it's a great idea. Let's follow the moon. It says to him, no. The reason why Hashem has a moon in his creation is because this is going to help us serve Hashem. How so? It's going to sanctify time. And time, every day is a moed. Every day, every day is a fixed time, a divinely appointed moment. And this is what we begin to see when the very first mitzvah is given to us. Hashem wants us to notice that every moment can be made special. How do we make it special? So back in the day when they made a calendar, they would calculate all the days of the month. And even though they just needed to know when Rosh Chodesh was, but they were counting days of the month, every day became part of that calculation, making every day holy. And that's how they did it back then. As the Rambam says in the Halacha, it's a mitzvah to calculate, to know, and determine the first day of each month of the year. And in order to do that, you need to calculate all the days. The High Court makes calculations like those of the astronomers, who know the location of the stars and the paths in their orbits. They conduct careful research to determine whether or not the moon will be visible at the appropriate time, either 30th night of the month, and every day is taken into consideration. So there is an element there of sanctifying, of using for a mitzvah each moment of the entire month. By calculating the lunar cycle daily, the sages transformed each moment into service of Hashem. That's how they did it back then. How do we do it today? What's the relevance of all of this in our life? Says the Rebbe in this particular Sikha, Chel Chavav, Project Sichas PLS this week. Says the Sikha, Hashem's purpose in creating the months of the year is not entirely fulfilled by concentrating the first of the month and the festivals, meaning specific days of the month. It is fulfilled when we reveal that the entire spectrum of time, all the days of the month, was created for Hashem's sake. When we change our perspective and we start thinking of time in a godly way, time isn't just a container that carries whatever you fill your calendar day with, whatever you write down on your piece of paper or your list or your phone or whatever else it is. This is accomplished by fulfilling the mitzvah of calculating and knowing all the details of the lunar calendar for the based in, the moon's orbit and position of the stars to determine when the first of each month will fall. And as the Sikh continues, merely establishing and consecrating the first of the month of the festivals, dates leads the intervening days to serve as a placeholder for the sacred festivals. However, when we calculate the entire lunar orbit, the whole month becomes a special day of divine purpose. So even though in this modern day and age we no longer consecrate the months, we can still fulfill the primary part of the mitzvah by performing the calculations for each day of the month and recognizing the holiness of each day. So we have to calculate, what mitzvahs can I do today? What mitzvahs can I do this morning? What mitzvahs can I do this hour? And where can I make this moment a meaningful, purposeful moment? Because all of time is becoming holy. How? When a Yiddish person who is empowered by Hashem to inject newness, holiness into everything in the world and every moment of the world starts seeing time from this perspective, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. This is the very foundational first mitzvah that we are taught in this week's parsha. The calculation of the Jewish calendar is the first mitzvah because it turns every moment into a mitzvah. Even the moments that are going to be the time that I'm just winding down. But that moment of winding down isn't just something I'm doing, it's using the time, the precious time, the creation of those moments to turn it into something meaningful, godly, and holy every moment of time. And this is the first mitzvah. Hashem should give us the koyach, the clarity, the passion of knowing that what we can do isn't just for things, not only for people, but for every moment, to make it count, to make it special. Avram Zakim Baba Yamu, Hashem gave Avram a bracha. Every day of his life, every moment of life was a fulfilled moment, and we are aspiring to do exactly the same. And Be'ezus Hashem, very, very soon, we'll see the effect of all this effort, Mashiach Tzidkenu, and we will be able to appreciate just how special our efforts are, how much Hashem treasures what we're doing. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Same time, same place next week. It'll be very close to Yud Shvat. Zayt gesund, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a good week.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Bye.
Mm-hmm.